My 7-year-old grandson squeezed my hand so tight under that white linen tablecloth that I thought he'd break my fingers. I was sitting at Table 8 in Harlem Sunrise, the fanciest soul food restaurant in Buckhead, Atlanta. The turkey in the middle of our table was golden brown, glistening under the chandelier like something out of a magazine. Sweet potato casserole with marshmallows toasted just right. Cornbread still steaming in a cast-iron skillet. My daughter-in-law, Vivian, had spent $2,400 on this Thanksgiving dinner, and every plate looked like it belonged in a photograph. But my grandson Jamal was trembling. He leaned into my arm, that small, warm body pressing against me like he was trying to disappear inside my sweater. His breath smelled like apple juice and fear. I felt his little hand cold as a stone in mine, and when I looked down at him, his big brown eyes, the same eyes his mama Naomi had, God rest her soul, were wet with tears he was trying not to let fall. He pulled me close. His lips touched my ear. "Grandma," he whispered, "you didn't look under the table yet, did you?" I felt the whole room go quiet, even though the jazz band was still playing and Vivian's family was still laughing at something Blake had said. My own heart slowed down. You know that feeling when your body knows something bad is coming before your mind catches up? That was me, right then, at 68 years old, sitting at a Thanksgiving table I didn't want to be at, with a grandson who was afraid of something I couldn't see. I glanced across the table. Vivian was lifting a glass of white wine to her lips, laughing with her mother Eleanor. My son Darius was next to her, looking at his plate like the answer to his whole life was written in the gravy. He didn't even see his own child shaking 2 feet away from him. I bent down slow, keeping my face calm, and I lifted the corner of that white tablecloth just a little. And when I saw what was on the floor by Vivian's purse, I knew. I knew this Thanksgiving was either going to be the last one my family ever spent whole, or the first one I was ever going to live free. My name is Phoebe Washington. I'm 68 years old. I was born in Selma, Alabama, in 1957, to a woman named Clara who raised 6 children on a maid's salary in the Lord's grace. I've buried a husband, I've buried a daughter-in-law, and I raised my only son Darius on pennies and prayers in a little 3-bedroom house on the southwest side of Atlanta. I wasn't always quiet. When I was 22, I marched with my mama in Montgomery. When I was 30, I integrated a secretarial pool at Coca-Cola headquarters and took more insults in 1 year than most folks take in a lifetime. I raised my voice when it needed to be raised. I knew how to hold my ground. But then my husband Maurice died of a heart attack in 1998, and I got tired. You hear me? Tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes you pick your battles smaller and smaller until one day you wake up and realize you haven't fought for yourself in 20 years. That's how I ended up on a Greyhound bus from Atlanta to Charleston 3 days before Thanksgiving 2024, carrying a tin of sweet potato pie on my lap like it was a newborn baby. Let me back up and tell you how I got on that bus. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I woke up at 5 in the morning. My knees hurt. They always hurt now. But I got out of bed because my mama raised me to greet the day whether the day wanted to be greeted or not. I put on my housecoat, the blue one my sister sent me from Birmingham in 2019, and I went to my kitchen. My kitchen is the heart of my house. You walk in there, and you see my mama's blue china dishes on the shelf above the stove. You see the cast-iron skillet that belonged to my grandmother Ruth. You see the recipe box with cards yellowing at the edges, some of them written in pencil by women who never knew they were leaving me a gift. I pulled out the recipe card that said Great-Great-Grandma Hattie's sweet potato pie. Hattie was born into slavery on a plantation in Lowndes County, Alabama, in 1847. She freed herself at 17 and walked 200 miles north, carrying her baby daughter on her hip. That baby grew up to be my great-grandmother, and Hattie's sweet potato pie recipe came down through 5 generations of black women, from her hands to my mama's hands to mine. I wasn't about to let this Thanksgiving pass without bringing that pie to my son. I boiled 6 sweet potatoes until the skins slid off like silk. I mashed them with real butter, not margarine, because margarine is what you use when you don't love anybody. I added brown sugar, vanilla, a pinch of salt, 3 eggs from the farmer's market on Cascade Road, a dash of bourbon that my husband Maurice had left in the cabinet before he died. I was saving it for something special. And the secret ingredient? Which I'm not going to tell you because Hattie didn't walk 200 miles so I could give her secrets away on the internet. I made the crust from scratch with lard, the way Hattie did it, the way my mama did it. I crimped the edges with my thumb and first finger, and I thought about how my mama used to stand behind me when I was a little girl, guiding my small hands to do the same thing. That pie came out of my oven at 11 o'clock in the morning, smelling like every Thanksgiving of my childhood. I put it in my good red tin, the one with white snowflakes on the lid, and I wrapped the tin in a dish towel and put it in a canvas bag. Then I went and got my purse and counted out $87 for the Greyhound ticket to Charleston. $87. Do you know how long it took me to save that? 3 months. I babysit for a young couple down the street 2 afternoons a week, and I charge them $15 an hour because I'm not going to undersell myself. But I also can't charge much more because they're a young black family trying to make it. And I remember what that was like. So I saved a little every week until I had enough for the bus ticket and a cheap motel. Darius hadn't offers to fly me up. Vivian had told him, "Mom can take the bus, baby. She's used to it." I didn't argue. I should have, but I didn't. Let me tell you about Thanksgivings before all this. Thanksgiving 2019 was the last one we had together with Naomi still in this world. Naomi, my beautiful daughter-in-law, my son's first wife, the mother of my grandbaby. Naomi with her big laugh that filled up a room. Naomi with her hair in 2 French braids she said made her feel like a little girl again. That year, Jamal was 3 years old. He toddled around my kitchen with peanut butter smeared across his whole face because Naomi had given him a peanut butter cracker to tide him over until dinner, and he'd somehow painted himself with it. Naomi and I stood side by side at my counter, and I taught her how to make collard greens with smoked ham hock the right way, low and slow, with a little apple cider vinegar and a pinch of red pepper flakes. "Miss Phoebe," she said to me that day, wiping her hands on the apron I'd given her, "when I die, I want my collards to taste like yours. That's all I'm asking the Lord for." I laughed. I told her she was being dramatic. 3 years later, I was standing at her casket at the AME Church on Hunter Street, watching my son fall to his knees and scream in a way I hope to God I never hear another human being scream again. Naomi had a stroke at 32 years old. A massive stroke, out of nowhere, on a regular Tuesday. She was making Jamal's lunch, peanut butter and jelly. She dropped in the kitchen, and by the time Darius got home from work, she was gone. I lost my husband. I lost my daughter-in-law. And then, slowly, piece by piece, I started losing my son. Darius married Vivian Brooks in March 2024. I got a save-the-date card in the mail. Not a phone call, not a sit-down conversation. A card with a picture of the two of them on a beach in Tulum, Mexico, and Vivian's hand on Darius's chest, showing off a diamond the size of a kidney stone. The wedding was at the Ritz-Carlton in Amelia Island. Vivian's family paid for most of it. I wasn't in the wedding party. I wasn't at the rehearsal dinner. I sat in the 3rd row because Vivian's mother Eleanor sat in the 2nd, and Vivian told Darius, "Baby, it just looks better this way for the pictures." Darius told me, "Mom, it's just pictures." I smiled. I said, "It's fine, baby." It wasn't fine, but I didn't know yet how not fine it was going to get. Vivian Brooks is 35 years old. She's a marketing director at a firm in Charleston that handles luxury real estate. She has skin the color of fresh cream, and she wears her hair in loose waves that cost $400 a month to maintain. And she has a laugh that sounds like a wind chime. Pretty, but empty. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend I didn't notice the way she looked at me from the first time we met. I've been a black woman in America for 68 years. I know what it looks like when somebody looks at me and sees a problem. I know what it looks like when somebody looks at me and sees a maid. I know what it looks like when somebody looks at me and starts calculating how to get me out of the room. Vivian looked at me that way from day one, but I never said anything to Darius, because my son was drowning in grief, and here came this woman with a life raft, and who was I to knock her hand away? That was my mistake. That was the mistake that almost cost me my grandbaby. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Vivian called me. "Mom, Phoebe," she said, in that voice she used when she was about to tell me something I wasn't going to like. "We're thinking about doing Thanksgiving at a restaurant this year, just for convenience. You don't need to bring anything, sweetheart. In fact, please don't. The restaurant does all the food." I held the phone, and I looked out my kitchen window at the pecan tree Maurice planted in 1989. "What restaurant?" I asked. "Harlem Sunrise in Buckhead. It's supposed to be amazing. Very modern soul food. You'll love it." Modern soul food. Let me tell you something. I've been eating soul food for 68 years. There is no modern version. There is only the right version and the wrong version. "Who all is coming?" I asked her. "Oh, just family," she said lightly. "Darius and Jamal, of course. My mother Eleanor, my brother Blake and his wife, my sister Tasha, your sister-in-law Keisha if she can make it, maybe your brother Eugene. So she was inviting my family to her dinner, at a restaurant, without asking me first. I said, "That sounds nice, Vivian." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and I cried for maybe 10 minutes. And then I wiped my face and I went to the store and I bought 6 sweet potatoes because I was going to bring that pie whether she wanted it or not. 3 days after that call, Darius texted me. "Mom, Viv booked Harlem Sunrise for Thanksgiving. Fancy place. Wear something nice, okay? Love you. Wear something nice." My son, Darius Washington, who I raised on beans and cornbread when the electricity got cut off in 1987, was telling me to wear something nice. I texted back, "I love you too, baby." I didn't say anything about the something nice part. On the Monday of Thanksgiving week, I packed my suitcase. I folded my blue wool sweater, the one I knitted myself in 2015 watching reruns of The Golden Girls. I folded my good black pants. I put in 2 pairs of thick socks because my feet get cold. I put in my Bible. I put the sweet potato pie in the red tin in a canvas bag. On Tuesday morning at 6 a.m., I got on a Greyhound bus at the downtown Atlanta station. The bus to Charleston takes 6.5 hours if traffic is good. I sat next to a young black girl who was going home from college for the holiday, and she told me she was studying to be a nurse. I told her my mama Clara had been a nurse. I told her my mama would have been proud of her. I looked out the window at Georgia rolling past, pine trees and red dirt and gas stations, and I thought about Naomi. I thought, Lord, I hope I'm doing this right. I hope I'm keeping our boy safe. I didn't know then how far I'd failed at that, but I was about to find out. I arrived at Harlem Sunrise on Thanksgiving Day at 6:45 in the evening, 15 minutes before the reservation. I was wearing my blue sweater and my good black pants. I had the pie in its red tin in the canvas bag. The restaurant was beautiful. I'll give Vivian that. Dark wood, warm gold light, exposed brick walls with framed photos of Harlem jazz musicians from the 1950s. A live band in the corner playing God Bless the Child, soft and slow. It was the kind of place where a meal cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. A young woman at the hostess stand smiled at me. "Welcome to Harlem Sunrise. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, baby. Under Washington. Party of 12. She looked at her screen. She frowned, just a little, and then she smiled again. "Oh, I see it. The Brooks party. Table 8. Right this way. The Brooks party. Not Washington. Brooks." I followed her through the restaurant, and I felt something in my chest tighten up. My son's name is Washington. His father's name was Washington. His grandfather's name was Washington. That is our family name, carried out of slavery by a man named Ezekiel Washington, who took it for himself because he was a free man and wanted a free name. And my daughter-in-law had put this dinner under Brooks. Table 8 was in the back corner, farthest from the band, farthest from the windows. It was a big round table set for 12. I was the first one there. I sat down in a chair that put my back to the wall, because my mama taught me to always sit where you can see the door. I put the canvas bag with the pie on the empty chair next to me. I ordered a glass of water. I waited. Darius and Vivian arrived at 7 o'clock. My son was wearing a charcoal gray suit with a navy tie. Vivian was wearing a black cocktail dress that I knew cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Her diamond earrings caught the light with every step. Darius leaned down and hugged me. It was a short hug. Shorter than last Thanksgiving. Shorter than the Thanksgiving before that. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hi, baby." Vivian air-kissed my cheeks, left and right, and said, "Mom, Phoebe, you look so rested. Rested. I've been called a lot of things in 68 years. Rested is a word that white women use when they mean tired, and they don't want to say tired because they don't want to seem cruel, but they want you to know they noticed your tiredness. It's a knife with a ribbon on it." I smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart. You look wonderful." She sat down across from me, and she placed her Chanel purse on the empty chair beside her, and she opened the menu without looking at me again. Darius sat next to her. He looked at me once, quick, and then looked at his menu too. At 7:15, Jamal arrived. My grandson came running through the restaurant ahead of a young woman I didn't recognize, and when he saw me, his whole face lit up like Christmas morning. He ran to me and threw his arms around my neck and buried his face in my sweater. "Grandma," he said, and his voice was muffled, but I heard it shake. "Grandma, I missed you so much." I held him. I held that boy tight. He smelled like the lavender shampoo Naomi used to buy for him and the peppermint candy somebody must have given him on the way over. His body was smaller than it should have been at 7 years old. Thinner. I felt every one of his ribs through his little dress shirt. "Jamal, sweetheart," Vivian said from across the table. "Indoor voice, honey. This is a nice restaurant." Jamal pulled back from me fast. Fast. The way a dog pulls back when it's been hit. He sat down in the chair next to me and folded his little hands in his lap and didn't say another word. The young woman who had brought him was a white girl in her early 20s, wearing a cardigan and jeans. She smiled politely at the table. "Mrs. Washington, Mrs. Brooks, I'll be back at 9 to pick him up." That was Teresa, apparently, the nanny. My son's 7-year-old child had been brought to Thanksgiving dinner by a nanny. Not by his father, not by his stepmother. Vivian smiled at Teresa. "Thank you, Teresa, you're an angel." Teresa left. I looked at Darius. He was studying his menu. I looked at Jamal. He was staring at his hands. I kept the canvas bag with the pie on my lap. At 7:30, Vivian's family swept in. Eleanor Brooks was 64 years old, a tall, thin woman with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and a string of pearls at her throat. Her husband had died in 2018, and she'd inherited a lot of money from a family construction business outside Charleston. She shook my hand when we met at the wedding last year, and her hand was cold. Blake Brooks was Vivian's older brother, a big red-faced man who worked in commercial real estate and laughed too loud. His wife Caroline was a quiet blonde who drank too much white wine. Tasha Brooks was Vivian's younger sister. She was 19 years old, a freshman at Spelman College in Atlanta, and she was the only member of the Brooks family who had ever looked me in the eye and smiled like she meant it. She wore her hair natural, in a soft afro, and she had a nose ring, which her mother Eleanor clearly hated. Tasha came around the table and hugged me before she sat down. "Miss Phoebe, it's so good to see you." "You too, baby." The Brooks family took up 7 seats. The Washington family took up 3, me, Jamal, and my sister-in-law Keisha, who arrived at 7:40 looking tired from her drive up from Macon. My brother Eugene couldn't make it after all. His wife was sick. 3 Washingtons, 7 Brookses, plus Darius, who had forgotten whose son he was. Keisha sat down on my other side, opposite Jamal, and she squeezed my hand under the table. "You okay, sis?" she whispered. "I'm all right." She looked at me like she didn't believe me. She looked around the table at the Brooks family laughing and ordering cocktails. She looked at Jamal, silent and small. "No," she said. "You're not. Here's something I noticed during those first 30 minutes at table 8. Every time Vivian laughed, Jamal's shoulders jumped. Just a little. Just a twitch. So small you'd miss it if you weren't watching. Every time Vivian said his name, "Jamal, sit up straight, honey." "Jamal, napkin in your lap, baby." He froze. He didn't look at her. He looked at his plate. He looked at his hands. He looked at the chandelier above us. He looked anywhere except her face. And once, just once, when Vivian reached across the table to move his water glass away from the edge, he flinched. You know what a flinch looks like on a child? It's not a startle. It's not surprise. A flinch is what happens when a body has learned what a hand means. Keisha saw it too. I saw her see it. She looked at me and her eyes were wet. "Phoebe," she whispered. "Phoebe, something is wrong." I nodded. I couldn't trust my voice. The jazz band played "Fly Me to the Moon." The waiters brought out a second bottle of wine. Blake Brooks told a story about his golf game. Eleanor laughed politely. Vivian laughed loudly. Darius smiled. And my grandson sat beside me, silent, not eating a single bite of the dinner rolls the waiter had placed in front of him, because he was waiting. He was waiting for something. At 7:45, the waiter came over to our table. He was a young man, maybe 24, with a warm smile and a name tag that said Malcolm. He had that easy way about him that good waiters have, where they can be invisible or visible depending on what the table needs. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Malcolm, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Happy Thanksgiving." He started going around the table taking drink orders. When he got to me, I reached into the canvas bag on my lap and pulled out the red tin with the white snowflakes on the lid. "Malcolm, baby," I said, "would you do me a favor? I brought a pie for the table. Could you keep it in the kitchen for us? We'll want it for dessert." Malcolm smiled. "Of course, ma'am. I'll put it right." "Oh, Mom," Vivian interrupted, her voice sweet as artificial sugar. "That's so thoughtful. but the restaurant actually has dessert included in the prix-fixe menu. We don't want to insult the chef, do we? I looked at her across the table. I kept my voice level. I'm sure the chef won't mind. This is a family recipe. It's for my son and grandson. Vivian's smile tightened, just at the corners. A little pull, a little warning. Well, she said, laughing a little laugh, if you insist. Malcolm, could you take that to the back for us? Malcolm looked between us. He was young, but he wasn't stupid. He'd worked in restaurants long enough to know a fight when he heard one dressing itself up in polite words. Yes, ma'am, he said to me. Not to her, to me. He took the tin carefully, the way you carry a baby, and he walked it back toward the kitchen. I watched him go. Across the table, Vivian took a sip of her wine, and I felt Jamal's hand find mine under the tablecloth and his small fingers squeeze. I looked down at him, and my grandbaby looked up at me with his mama's big brown eyes, and he whispered, so soft I almost missed it under the sound of the jazz band and the clink of silverware. Grandma, please don't let her take my pie. Malcolm came back to our table about 6 minutes later. I know it was 6 minutes because I was watching the small gold clock on the wall behind Vivian's head. I was watching that clock the way a woman watches a pot she thinks is about to boil over. Jamal's hand was still in mine under the tablecloth, and his little fingers hadn't stopped shaking. When Malcolm walked up, he was carrying a white ceramic dish. Not my red tin. The dish had a lattice crust on top, the kind you get from a bakery where a machine cuts the strips for you. The edges were too perfect, the color was too pale, and the smell, I would know the smell of my pie anywhere, the bourbon and the brown sugar and the butter, and this didn't smell like any of that. This smelled like a Whole Foods pastry case. Malcolm set the dish down in the middle of the table. His face was tight. Dessert is served, folks. Fresh pumpkin pie. Malcolm, I said, keeping my voice steady. Where is my pie? Malcolm swallowed. He looked at Vivian, quick, and then back at me. Ma'am, I told him to swap it out, Mom, Vivian said smoothly, cutting him off. She smiled at me the way you smile at a child who has brought you a drawing you don't want to hang on the fridge. I didn't want you to be embarrassed. Homemade pies can be hit or miss at a place like this. The restaurant has pastry chefs. It's just better for everyone. Embarrassed. My great-great-grandmother Hattie walked 200 miles north with a baby on her hip, and my daughter-in-law thought her pie was going to embarrass anybody. Keisha, beside me, made a small sound in her throat. I put my hand on her knee under the table to tell her, not yet, baby. Darius wasn't looking at me. My son was looking at his wine glass, and his jaw was tight, but his mouth wasn't moving. I looked at Malcolm. That young man had a look on his face I recognized. It was the look of somebody who had been asked to do something wrong and hadn't known how to say no. It's all right, Malcolm, I said gently. You did what you were told. Ma'am, I put your pie in the back. It's still there, safe. I can bring it out whenever. Malcolm, Vivian said sharply. Thank you. Malcolm nodded and walked away. I looked at Vivian across the table and I smiled at her. I smiled a smile I learned in 1965 at a lunch counter in Montgomery, where a white man spit on my mama and she didn't move a muscle in her face. That was thoughtful of you, Vivian. Vivian's smile flickered, just a tiny flicker, because she knew, and I knew, that I knew. The appetizers came out. Crab cakes, butternut squash soup, a salad with goat cheese and pecans. I watched Jamal pick at his food, pushing it around his plate. He ate 2 bites of soup. He didn't touch the salad. Jamal, baby, I said to him softly, are you hungry? Grandma can order you something else. Before he could answer, Vivian leaned over. Jamal ate a big lunch, didn't you, sweetie? He's fine. Jamal nodded, but he didn't look at her. He looked at his soup. Tasha, across the table, caught my eye. The 19-year-old, Vivian's little sister. And Tasha's face was tight, and her eyes were moving between Jamal and Vivian, and I could see her thinking something she wasn't saying out loud. I filed that away. I was telling Tasha a story. Tasha had asked me how I met Naomi, my first daughter-in-law, the mother of Jamal. May she rest in peace. Tasha was genuinely interested. I could tell by the way she leaned forward, the way her eyes were soft. She was the only Brooks at that table who had ever asked me a real question. I told her Naomi and I had met in 2014 at a Baptist church revival on Martin Luther King Drive. Naomi was singing in the choir. I was visiting with a friend. Naomi had a voice like warm honey poured over gravel. Mom, Vivian said, placing her wine glass down. Honey, let's not bring up Naomi tonight. It's awkward for Darius. The whole table went quiet. Blake coughed. Eleanor Brooks pretended to adjust her napkin. Caroline took a long sip of wine. Tasha opened her mouth to say something, then closed it. I looked at my son. Darius, my only child. The boy I labored for 18 hours to bring into this world in 1983. The boy I taught to tie his shoes, to read his letters, to pray before he ate. Darius did not look up from his plate. He did not look up. My heart sat down inside my chest like something had died. You're right, Vivian, I said quietly. I apologize. I apologized. To her, for mentioning the mother of my grandson on Thanksgiving. Keisha pressed her leg hard against mine under the table. Tasha's eyes were shining. We were halfway through the main course, a beautiful plate of roasted turkey with cornbread dressing and collard greens that were not as good as mine, but they were fine. When Eleanor Brooks tapped her wine glass lightly with her spoon, I have a lovely announcement, Eleanor said, smiling around the table. Vivian and I have been talking, and we've decided that this Christmas, Jamal will be joining the Brooks family at our Martha's Vineyard house. We think it's time he experienced some broader traditions. The cousins are so excited to meet him. The Brooks family all nodded and smiled like this was settled. I sat very still. I had bought a plane ticket to Charleston for Christmas. $340, non-refundable. I had been saving for it since August. I had wrapped Jamal's gift already, a set of books about famous black inventors, and a toy telescope because he told me on the phone last summer he wanted to see Saturn. I looked at Darius. My son did not look at me. Darius, I said, and my voice was calm, but I could hear a thread of something in it I hadn't heard in years. Is that what you've decided? Darius shifted in his seat. Mom, we were going to call you about it. When? Soon, this week. Christmas is in 4 weeks, baby. Mom, Phoebe, Vivian said, leaning in with that sweet voice. I know it's a change, but Jamal deserves to experience my family's traditions too. We're a blended family now. It's about balance. Balance. Let me tell you about balance. For the last 8 months, I had seen my grandson exactly 3 times. 3 times in 8 months, from a grandmother who used to see him every single weekend. For 8 months, every time I had called to see Jamal, Vivian had answered the phone and told me he was busy, napping, at a play date, doing homework. For 8 months. And now I was being told that Christmas was Martha's Vineyard. Without me. All right, I said, because what was I going to do? Make a scene at a restaurant table in front of 12 people? I knew how that would go. Vivian would play the victim. Darius would apologize to her. I would be the crazy old black lady who couldn't let her son grow up. So I said, all right, and I hated myself for saying it. Blake Brooks, Vivian's big red-faced brother, was on his 3rd bourbon by the time the main course was cleared. He was the kind of man who thought every thought he had was a gift to the room. He started telling a story about a hunting trip in Alabama with his college buddies. And we stopped in this little hole-in-the-wall place in some tiny town, y'all. I can't even remember the name. Greenville or something. And the food was unbelievable. I mean, real Southern cooking, you know what I mean? Lots of love, lots of lard. He laughed. Big belly laugh. Caroline laughed. Eleanor chuckled politely. And my son Darius laughed too. He laughed at the joke about Southern cooking. The Southern cooking that I had made for him every day of his childhood. The collard greens and the cornbread and the fried chicken and the red beans and rice that had kept him alive when we didn't have much else. The food that came from my mother Clara, who learned it from her mother Bessie, who learned it from great-great-grandma Hattie, who carried those recipes with her when she walked herself free. My son laughed at that food, in front of his wife's white family, at a restaurant table where his own mother was sitting. Keisha's hand was gripping mine so hard under the table that my wedding ring was cutting into my finger. But I didn't pull away. I needed her holding me. I needed someone in this world holding on to me. Tasha was staring at her plate, red in the face, and I realized that girl was ashamed of her own family. 19 years old, and she was the only one at that table with sense. Malcolm brought coffee around. Decaf for Eleanor, regular for Blake, espresso for Vivian, hot water with lemon for Caroline. Tasha smiled at Jamal. Jamal, what are you thankful for this year, buddy? Jamal froze. He looked at me. Then he looked down at his napkin. Go on, honey, Vivian said, light and sweet. Tell Aunt Tasha what you're thankful for. Jamal didn't speak. Jamal, Vivian said, and I heard the shift in her voice. It was the shift that happens when sugar turns to something harder. Answer your aunt. Jamal's little hands were folded in his lap. His shoulders were up around his ears. And then, so quietly that the jazz band almost drowned him out, my grandson said, I'm thankful Grandma came, because when Grandma's here, Miss Vivian doesn't lock my door at night. The table went dead silent. I mean silent. The kind of silence where you can hear ice settling in a glass 3 tables away. Blake's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Caroline's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Eleanor's face went completely still. Tasha made a sound. A tiny sound, like a hurt animal. Vivian laughed. She actually laughed. A high, bright, terrible laugh. Oh, sweetheart, that's your imagination. We've talked about this, remember? The door doesn't lock. You just dream that it does. Darius looked up for the first time in 20 minutes. He looked at his wife. Then he looked at his son. Jamal? Darius said. His voice was thick. Buddy, what are you talking about? Darius, he's 7, Vivian said quickly. He has nightmares. We've been to 2 specialists about it. You know this. Jamal, Darius said again. Look at me, son. Jamal didn't look at his father. Jamal looked at me. And I, Phoebe Washington, 68 years old, born in Selma, Alabama, took my grandson's hand in mine on top of the table. Not under it, on top of it, where everybody could see. And I turned his hand over gently, and I looked at his wrist. There were 4 fading bruises on the inside of his left wrist, shaped like fingertips. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry out. I didn't say a word. I just looked at those bruises, and I looked at Vivian, and I looked at my son, and I saw that Darius was now looking at Jamal's wrist too, and his face was changing, slowly, like a man waking up. Viv, Darius said, where did those come from? Darius, he falls all the time. He's a clumsy kid. You know this. Where did those come from, Vivian? It wasn't a question the second time. Eleanor Brooks said, perhaps we should all take a breath. But nobody was listening to Eleanor. I was still holding Jamal's hand. I could feel him shaking. I leaned down to him. Baby, I whispered, can you show Grandma what's in Miss Vivian's purse? What you saw earlier? Jamal nodded, and my grandson slid off his chair, and he crawled under the edge of the tablecloth, and before Vivian could stop him, he came back up with something in his hand. 2 things, actually. A folded piece of paper and a small amber prescription bottle. Jamal put both items on the white tablecloth, in the middle of the table, between the turkey platter and the centerpiece of dried wheat and orange mums. I picked up the bottle first. The label said, lorazepam, 0.5 milligrams tablets. Patient, Jamal Washington, age 7. Prescribed by Dr. Heather McKinney. Take 1 tablet at bedtime as needed for anxiety. Lorazepam. That's what they give grown women for panic attacks. That's what hospice nurses give dying patients to keep them calm in their last hours. That's what my daughter-in-law was giving my 7-year-old grandson every night, at bedtime, behind a locked door. My hands did not shake when I unfolded the piece of paper. It was a legal document, typed on law firm letterhead. Harwell and Benton, Attorneys at Law, Charleston, South Carolina. Petition for transfer of legal guardianship, minor child. Jamal Washington, age 7. Current legal guardian. Darius R. Washington, biological father. Proposed co-guardian with full authority. Vivian Brooks Washington, stepmother. Filing date. Monday, December 2nd, 2024. Monday. 4 days from now. I laid the paper down flat on the tablecloth. I looked across the table at Vivian Brooks Washington. Her face was white. Not pale. White. Like somebody had opened her up and drained the blood out. Darius picked up the paper. I watched his eyes move across it. I watched his mouth fall open. I watched my son understand for the first time what had been happening in his own house while he was sleeping next to his new wife. Viv, he said. His voice was broken glass. What is this? Darius, that's not what it looks like. What is this, Vivian? Blake Brooks said, now let's everyone just calm down. Shut up, Blake, Tasha said. Everybody looked at her. Tasha Brooks, 19 years old, wearing a nose ring her mother hated, stood up from her chair. She was trembling, but she was standing. Mama, Tasha said to Eleanor. I have to tell them. I can't keep it anymore. Tasha, sit down, Eleanor hissed. No, Mama, I saw her. 2 months ago, when I came to visit for Labor Day. I saw Viv give Jamal one of those pills in his apple juice. I asked her about it. She told me to mind my business. She told me if I said anything, she'd tell Mama I was selling drugs at Spelman, which I am not, and she'd get my scholarship revoked. Tasha was crying now. I'm sorry, Miss Phoebe. I'm so sorry. I should have called you. I had your number. I should have called you. I stood up from my chair. I didn't plan to. My body just did it. 68 years of sitting down quietly, and my body just stood up on its own. The whole restaurant had gone quiet. Not just our table, the whole restaurant. The jazz band was still playing, but every other table had turned to look at us. Malcolm was standing by the kitchen door with a tray in his hands, frozen. I looked at Vivian. I did not raise my voice. I did not scream. I did not curse. I spoke to her the way my Mama Clara used to speak when she had a thing to say, and she wanted God himself to hear it. Vivian, she looked up at me. I'm going to say some things now, and you're going to listen. And when I'm done, I'm going to walk out of this restaurant with my grandbaby, and you are never going to see him again as long as I am breathing air on this earth. Do you understand me? Mom, Phoebe, don't you call me that. She stopped. My name is Phoebe Washington. I am not your mother. I have never been your mother. You made sure of that from the first day you walked into my son's life. I turned to Darius. My son was crying, silent tears rolling down his face into his beard. Darius Maurice Washington, I am your mother. I carried you for 9 months. I fed you from my own body. I worked 2 jobs so you could go to Morehouse. I sat by your father's hospital bed for 3 weeks in 1998, and I told him you were going to be okay, because I had to believe it, so you could believe it. I buried your wife Naomi with you. I held you at her funeral when you could not stand up. Mom, I am not finished, Darius. He closed his mouth. For 8 months, I have watched you forget who you are. I have watched you let a woman come into your home and erase the mother of your child. I have watched you let that woman call the shots on every holiday, every decision, every dollar. I watched you sit at this table tonight and laugh at a joke about Southern cooking while your own mother sat 3 feet away from you. I have watched you not look at me, Darius, not look at your own mama. Darius was sobbing now. Mom, I'm sorry. And tonight I watched you almost lose your son, not just lose him to this woman, lose him for good. Because this paper in my hand, this was going to go through on Monday. And once she had legal guardianship of Jamal, she was going to take him. I know it. You know it. Everybody at this table knows it. I picked up the prescription bottle. And she's been drugging him, my grandbaby, 7 years old, being given lorazepam every night so he would sleep through whatever she was doing to him. Eleanor Brooks closed her eyes. Something about the way she closed her eyes made my whole body go cold. Mrs. Brooks, I said slowly. Eleanor, look at me. Eleanor opened her eyes. They were wet. Has she done this before? Eleanor did not answer. Eleanor, has she done this before? Eleanor's mouth opened and closed and opened again, and nothing came out. But her face told me everything. Her face told me there was a whole other story underneath this one. A story I didn't know yet. A story that was going to crack this thing wide open. I filed that away too. I turned to my grandson. Jamal, baby, do you want to go with Grandma tonight? Jamal nodded so hard his whole body moved. Yes, please, Grandma. Yes, please, yes, please, yes, please. I held out my hand. He took it. Keisha stood up. I'm coming too, sis. Tasha, across the table, was still crying. Miss Phoebe, can I help? Can I do something? I looked at that girl, 19 years old, the one Brooks who had a soul. Baby, I said, you come to my house in Atlanta whenever you need to. You hear me? Southwest Atlanta. Anybody can tell you where I live. You come. Tasha nodded, crying. I reached into the canvas bag that was still next to my chair, and I pulled out the receipt I'd kept from the Greyhound bus. I put it on the table next to the guardianship papers. Darius, when you are ready to be my son again, you know where I live. I did not raise a coward. I will wait for you to come back to yourself. But I am not waiting here. I picked up my purse. I looked at Malcolm, still standing by the kitchen door. Malcolm, baby, can I get my pie? Malcolm nodded fast. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Right away. He ran to the kitchen and came back with the red tin. He handed it to me carefully. both hands, like he understood that he was handing me something sacred. "God bless you, ma'am," he said quietly. "God bless you too, baby. You're a good young man." I took the tin. I took Jamal's hand. Keisha picked up her coat. And the three of us, a 68-year-old black woman, a 38-year-old black woman, and a 7-year-old boy holding his grandma's hand, walked out of Harlem Sunrise Restaurant in Buckhead, Atlanta on Thanksgiving night 2024. We left behind a $2,400 dinner that my son had paid for. We left behind a woman who had tried to steal my grandbaby. We left behind a table of people who, for 8 months, had made me feel invisible in my own family. We walked out into the cold November air, and Jamal looked up at me under the streetlight outside the restaurant, and my grandson said, "Grandma, I'm hungry." I laughed. First time I'd laughed in 3 days. "Baby," I said, "Grandma's got pie." The walkout is quiet, not loud. Phoebe doesn't scream. She speaks the way black grandmothers across America speak when they've finally decided enough is enough. And that's the tone that makes women over 60 text each other YouTube links. I'd booked it 3 weeks earlier, back when I was still planning to stay through the weekend and maybe take Jamal to the aquarium on Saturday. The room had 2 double beds with scratchy brown comforters, a television bolted to the dresser, and a framed print of a lighthouse on the wall that was hanging crooked. It smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and somebody's old cigarettes from 10 years ago. It was the most beautiful room I had ever been in, because my grandbaby was safe in it. Keisha drove us there in her old blue Honda Civic. Jamal sat in the back seat holding the red tin of sweet potato pie on his lap like it was a trophy. Nobody said much on the drive. Jamal was exhausted, the kind of exhausted a child gets when his body has been carrying something too heavy for too long, and his head kept drifting against the window. When we got to the room, I ran him a warm bath. I sat on the closed toilet lid while he played with the little shampoo bottles, and I watched him laugh at the bubbles like a regular 7-year-old boy. Not a boy who had been drugged. Not a boy with bruises. Just a boy. "Grandma," he said, splashing water at me, "can I have pie in the bathtub?" "Baby, no. But you can have pie right after." "2 pieces?" "3 if you want." He ate 3 pieces of great-great-grandma Hattie's sweet potato pie sitting cross-legged on the motel bed in his undershirt and the clean pajamas Keisha had run down to the Walgreens to buy him. He ate with his hands. No fork, just hands. And he looked up at me between bites with sweet potato on his chin and said, "Grandma, this is the best thing I ever ate in my whole life." I said, "I know, baby." I didn't cry until after he fell asleep. Keisha and I sat on the edge of the other bed in the dark, watching Jamal breathe. She whispered, "Phoebe, what are we going to do?" "I don't know yet." "That paper she had, she was going to—" "I know." "Phoebe, that woman was going to take him." "I know, Keisha." We sat there quiet for a long time. The television was on with no sound, some cooking show. Outside the window, a truck pulled into the parking lot, its headlights sweeping across the curtain and then gone. Keisha said, "What if you hadn't come? What if you hadn't gotten on that bus?" I didn't answer her. I couldn't. Because I had thought about it too, on the drive over. I had thought, what if I had let Vivian talk me out of coming? What if I had taken her at her word 2 weeks ago, when she said not to bring anything, when she basically told me not to come? What if I had been the kind of mother who takes a hint? Monday was 4 days away. 4 days. I put my face in my hands, and I cried the kind of cry that doesn't make noise. The kind where your whole body shakes, but nothing comes out. Because if you let it come out, you might never stop. Keisha put her arm around my shoulders. She didn't say anything. She just sat with me. That's what sisters do, even when they're adopted sisters, even when the blood isn't the same, but the love is. My phone started ringing at 2:17 in the morning. It was on the nightstand. I'd plugged it in to charge before I lay down. The screen lit up the whole room. Keisha cell. I picked it up, confused for half a second. Then I remembered she was in the bed next to me, and I looked over. She was sitting up, already on her phone. She was the one calling. No, wait. It wasn't Keisha. It was Keisha's daughter, Aaliyah, who was 18 and in her first year at Clark Atlanta. Aaliyah had been staying at my house while Keisha came up to Charleston. I answered. "Aunt Phoebe? Oh my God, Aunt Phoebe, are you okay?" "Baby, what's wrong?" "Mama called me from your phone earlier and told me some of it, but Uncle Darius just showed up at your house. He's been banging on the door for like 10 minutes. He's crying, Aunt Phoebe. He's really crying. What do I do?" I sat up. He drove from Charleston? He must have. He's here. Let me talk to him. Aaliyah unlocked the door. I heard it open. I heard my son's voice in the background, broken, saying, "Is she there? Is she there, please?" Aaliyah said, "Here, it's her." "Mom?" "Darius." "Mom, Mom, He couldn't talk. He was sobbing. I heard him sit down hard on my porch swing, the one Maurice built in 1992. "Mama," he said. "Mama, what did I do? What did I do?" I closed my eyes. I held the phone tight. "Baby," I said, "you need to listen to me right now. I need you to do 3 things. Are you listening?" "Yes, ma'am." "First, I need you to stay at my house tonight. Sleep in your old room. Aaliyah will get you a blanket." "Yes, ma'am." "Second, tomorrow morning, first thing, I need you to call the police in Charleston and report everything you saw tonight, the prescription bottle, the paperwork. Everything Jamal said about the locked door." "Yes, ma'am." "Third," I paused. "Do not call Vivian. Do not answer if she calls you. Do you understand me, Darius? Not one word, not one text, nothing." He was quiet. "Darius." "Yes, Mama, I understand." "We'll talk tomorrow. Go to sleep in your old room. And Darius." "Yes, Mama?" "I love you. I still love you. Don't you forget it." He sobbed so hard I heard it through the phone. "I love you too, Mama. I love you so much. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I tried to go back to sleep after that, but I couldn't. I lay in the dark listening to Jamal's small, steady breathing, and I thought about my son on my porch swing in Atlanta, 300 miles away, breaking open like a piece of fruit that had been rotting on the inside. At 6 in the morning, somebody knocked on the motel door. I froze. Keisha sat up fast. "You expecting somebody?" "No." She got up quiet and looked through the peephole. Then she looked back at me and her face was strange. "Phoebe, it's her." "Vivian?" "No, her mama, Eleanor." I opened the door. Eleanor Brooks was standing in the cold, wet morning wearing the same gray cashmere coat she'd worn to the restaurant, but it was buttoned wrong, and her hair wasn't brushed. Her eyes were red and swollen. She looked like she hadn't slept. She looked like a woman who had been carrying something for a very long time. "Mrs. Washington," she said. "May I come in, please?" I stepped back and let her in. Keisha put on the coffee pot that came with the room. Eleanor sat down in the little chair by the window, and she clasped her hands in her lap like a child about to give a recitation. I sat on the bed across from her. Jamal was still asleep under the covers, one small fist curled up near his cheek. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. Her face crumpled. "He looks like my grandson Michael did at that age. Michael is Blake's boy. Same cowlick in the back." "Mrs. Brooks." "Eleanor, please. You can call me Eleanor." "Eleanor, why are you here?" She took a shaking breath. "Because I have been a coward for 13 years. And last night, when that baby showed us those bruises, I realized that I was about to be a coward for a 14th year, and I could not live with myself if something happened to him because I kept my mouth shut." She paused. She looked down at her hands. "Mrs. Washington, Phoebe, I need to tell you something about my daughter that I have never told another living soul. Not my husband before he died. Not my other children. Not my pastor. No one." I waited. In 2011, Vivian had a daughter. Her name was Grace. Keisha stopped pouring coffee. Vivian was 22 years old. She was engaged to a young man named Thomas Pritchard, a lovely boy from a family we knew in Mount Pleasant. They weren't married yet, but the baby came. Grace. Eleanor's hands were shaking so hard she couldn't take the coffee cup Keisha was holding out. Keisha set it on the table. Grace was a beautiful baby. A beautiful, healthy baby. The pediatrician said she was in the 99th percentile for everything. Happy, easy, laughed all the time. Eleanor's voice broke. Grace died at 8 months old. The coroner's report said sudden infant death syndrome. They said there was nothing anyone could have done. They said it happens sometimes. She looked up at me. Her eyes were burning. "Phoebe, I don't think it was SIDS. I never thought it was SIDS. But I never said anything because Vivian was my daughter, and I could not. She broke down. I got up and sat next to her on the arm of the chair. I put my hand on her back. I didn't know what else to do. "Eleanor, what did you see?" "I didn't see anything. That's the thing. I never saw anything. But 3 weeks before Grace died, I went to Vivian's apartment unannounced. She was supposed to be watching Grace alone for the afternoon because Thomas was at work, and when I walked in, I heard Vivian in the bedroom. She was yelling at the baby. A real yell, Phoebe. The kind of yell you don't use at an 8-month-old. And Grace was screaming. Just screaming. And then I heard a sound. I heard a slap on something soft. And then Grace stopped screaming. Just stopped. Eleanor was shaking. I walked into that bedroom and Vivian had her back to me. She was holding Grace. Grace was red-faced and crying again by then, but quieter. Like something had broken in her. Vivian turned around and saw me, and her face, Phoebe. Her face was not the face of a mother who had just been overwhelmed and lost her temper. Her face was satisfied. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I understood. I took Grace from her that day. I took her to my house for the weekend. I thought, I'll talk to Thomas. I'll tell him what I saw. But then Monday came and I didn't do it, because Vivian was my daughter. And what if I was wrong? And what if I destroyed her marriage over nothing? And what if what I heard wasn't what I thought I heard? Eleanor was crying openly now. 3 weeks later, Grace died in her crib. Vivian was home alone with her. Thomas was out of town on business. The coroner said SIDS. Everyone said SIDS. Thomas left Vivian 6 months later anyway. He told me, at his wedding to his second wife years later, that he'd always wondered, but he couldn't live with wondering, so he left. And I watched my daughter bury her baby and I said nothing. I said nothing. She looked up at me. Phoebe, last night, when that little boy pulled those things out from under the table, and I saw his face, and I saw the bruises on his wrist, I knew. And I cannot let another child die because I was too much of a coward to save Grace. She took a deep breath. I have kept Grace's medical records, all of them. The coroner's report, the pediatrician's records, the ER visit 3 weeks before she died when Vivian said Grace rolled off the couch. I kept everything in a box in my attic for 13 years because I knew, somewhere I knew, that I would need them one day. I am going to give them to the police. I am going to testify. I am going to tell the truth about my daughter, even if it kills me. I didn't say anything for a long time. I just held her. 2 mamas, 2 grandmamas, 1 black and 1 white, and the whole history of this country sitting between us on a cheap motel chair. And neither one of us cared about any of that in that moment. We were just 2 old women who had almost lost babies. Eleanor, I said finally, you are saving him right now. You hear me? You are saving him. She nodded into my shoulder. I should have saved Grace. Baby, I said, and I meant it. You're saving her too. You're saving her right now. Everything moved fast after that. By noon on Black Friday, the Charleston Police Department had opened an active child endangerment investigation against Vivian Brooks Washington. Eleanor walked into the station with her lawyer and Grace's files at 11 in the morning. By 3 in the afternoon, the Cook County Medical Examiner in Chicago, where Grace had been born and briefly lived, had agreed to review Grace's 2011 case file. By Monday, the day the guardianship papers were supposed to be filed, Vivian was being questioned under oath about her relationship with Dr. Heather McKinney, the pediatrician who had prescribed lorazepam to a 7-year-old boy with no documented anxiety diagnosis. Dr. McKinney, it turned out, was the wife of Vivian's college roommate. She was going to lose her medical license. She was probably going to lose more than that. By Wednesday, a family court judge in Atlanta granted me emergency temporary custody of Jamal. Darius signed the papers willingly. He was the one who requested it. By Friday, Viviana was arrested and charged with child endangerment, administering controlled substances to a minor, and conspiracy to commit fraud in the attempted guardianship transfer. Her bail was set at $200,000. Eleanor paid it, then publicly announced she was cooperating fully with the district attorney's office. The story broke in the Charleston Post and Courier the following week. Then the Atlanta Journal-Constitution picked it up. Then CNN. Grandmother's instinct exposes alleged child abuse at Thanksgiving dinner. They got a picture of me from somewhere, I don't know where, standing on my porch in Atlanta, and they printed it with the article. I looked tired. I looked my age. But I also looked like a woman who knew something she hadn't known a month ago. I looked like a woman who was not invisible anymore. Darius started therapy the first week of December, twice a week. A black therapist named Dr. Dawson on Ponce de Leon Avenue. I know because Darius told me. He told me everything. He moved out of the house in Charleston and moved into a one-bedroom apartment 2 blocks from my house in southwest Atlanta, and he came to see me every single day for 3 weeks before I let him see Jamal. That wasn't my idea. That was Dr. Dawson's idea. She said Jamal needed to feel safe with me first, and Darius needed to rebuild his own self before he could be a father again. The first time Darius came to my kitchen door, I made him stand on the porch for 10 minutes before I opened it. Not because I was punishing him, because I needed to look at him through the screen and see if he was really back. He was. I could tell. His eyes had light behind them again. He sat at my kitchen table and he cried, and then he ate 2 bowls of the gumbo I had on the stove, and then he helped me wash dishes. We didn't talk about big things the first day. We talked about small things. The weather, the Falcons game, whether my pecan tree was going to need to come down next year. But on the 3rd day, he looked at me over the sink and he said, "Mama, how did you know? When did you know?" I thought about it. Baby, I think I knew the day I met her. I just didn't let myself know, because I wanted you to be happy, and I was scared to tell you something you didn't want to hear. He nodded. Mama, I hated you for a little while she was in my house. I hated you for existing, because every time I thought about you, I felt bad about myself. I know, baby. I hated Naomi too. I hated her for dying. I put the dish towel down. Son, come here. He came over to me, my 42-year-old son, 6 feet tall, and I put my arms around him and held him the way I'd held him when he was 4 and had a fever. It's all right, baby. It's all right to have hated me. It's all right to have hated Naomi. It's all right to have hated yourself. You can put all that down now. You hear me? You can put it down. He cried into my shoulder. I'm going to put it down, Mama. I know you are, baby. Jamal and I built a life. He transferred into Mrs. Johnson's 2nd grade class at the elementary school down the street from my house. Mrs. Johnson had taught Darius in 2nd grade 35 years ago. She cried when she saw Jamal's name on her roster. I fed him 3 meals a day, real food, greens and beans and cornbread and eggs for breakfast and apple slices with peanut butter for after school. The child who had been pushing food around at Thanksgiving put on 8 pounds in 3 months. He grew 2 inches in 6 months. The pediatrician I took him to, not Dr. McKinney, a new one, Dr. Okonkwo, a Nigerian woman with kind eyes, told me he was completely healthy. No long-term effects from the lorazepam, God be praised. No developmental delays. Mrs. Washington, Dr. Okonkwo told me, whatever you are doing for this child, keep doing it. He is thriving. I said, I'm just loving him. She smiled. That is not a small thing. Tasha Brooks transferred to Spelman's Atlanta campus for the spring semester. She moved into a dorm 6 miles from my house. She started coming over every Sunday for dinner. She would bring her laundry and do it in my washer while we cooked. She called me Miss Phoebe for the first 2 months. Then one Sunday in February, she called me Grandma Phoebe by accident, and she turned bright red and started apologizing, and I said, Baby, I like that. You keep calling me that if you want. She cried. She hugged me. She's been Grandma Phoebe's Tasha ever since. Thanksgiving 2025. 1 year later. My house in southwest Atlanta. The same house Vivian had told Darius we should sell because the neighborhood was declining. The house Maurice and I bought in 1987. The house Darius grew up in. The house Naomi first walked into in 2014 when she squeezed my hand and said, Miss Phoebe, your kitchen smells like heaven. My kitchen smelled like heaven that day too. Turkey in the oven. 2 pies cooling on the counter. Sweet potato and pecan. Collard greens simmering on the back burner with smoked ham hock and apple cider vinegar, the way great-great-grandma Hattie made them. Cornbread in my grandmother Ruth's cast-iron skillet. The people around my table. My son Darius, 43, wearing a navy sweater I knitted him for his birthday. My grandson Jamal, 8 years old, missing his 2 front teeth, wearing a little bow tie he picked out himself because he said it made him look fancy like Grandma likes. My sister by love Keisha and her daughter Aaliyah. My brother Eugene and his wife Darlene. My best friend since 1971, Loretta Hayes, from 3 houses down. Tasha Brooks, who had spent the entire morning peeling sweet potatoes at my kitchen counter and asking me questions about her great-great-great-grandmother who I didn't know, because that's what grandmothers by love do. They adopt your history too. And Eleanor Brooks. Eleanor had asked in October if she could come. She had asked in a letter, not a phone call, because she said she wanted me to have time to say no without feeling guilty. She had written, I do not expect to be welcome, but I want you to know I would consider it the greatest honor of my life to sit at your table. Eleanor. I had written her back. Bring sweet potato pie. Not store-bought. I'll send you the recipe. She came. She brought pie. Hers wasn't as good as mine, but it was close. Vivian had pled guilty in August to avoid a trial. She was sentenced to 12 years in a South Carolina state prison. The investigation into Grace Pritchard's death was ongoing. The Charleston DA had told Eleanor it was likely there would be additional charges by spring 2026. We did not talk about Vivian at the Thanksgiving table. Not once. We did not need to. Before we ate, Darius stood up at the head of the table. He raised his glass. Before I say grace, he said, I want to say something to my mother. I looked up. Mama, I spent a lot of years running from grief. I lost Naomi and I let the grief turn me into somebody who couldn't see his own family. I let somebody come into my life and I let her push you out of it because it was easier than feeling what I was feeling. And she almost took my son from me. I want to say, in front of everybody at this table, that you saved my son. Your instinct saved him. Your love saved him. And you saved me too. You saved me by not giving up on me even when I gave up on you. I was not a good son for a while. I am going to spend the rest of my life being a good son. The whole table was crying. Eleanor was crying. Keisha was crying. Loretta was crying in her way, which is silent and dignified. Jamal wasn't crying. Jamal was beaming. He looked at me from across the table with his Mama Naomi's eyes, and he lifted his glass of apple juice and he said, To Grandma Phoebe. Everybody said it back. To Grandma Phoebe. And then Jamal said, And can we eat now? Because I am starving. Everybody laughed. I laughed. And then my son picked up his guitar from the corner of the living room, the guitar he had not touched in 3 years, not since Naomi died, and he played Lean on Me by Bill Withers, and Jamal sang along because his daddy had taught him the words, and I sat at the head of my own table in my own kitchen in my own house, and I watched my family. My family, blood and not blood, black and white, young and old, broken and healing, my family. Later that night, after everybody had gone home, Tasha back to her dorm, Eleanor back to the hotel she'd booked in Midtown, Darius and Jamal next door to Darius's apartment for the night. I sat on my porch swing and looked up at the stars. I thought about Hattie, my great-great-grandmother, walking 200 miles north with a baby on her hip in 1864. I thought about Clara, my mama, who worked as a maid in white folks' houses in Selma for 42 years. I thought about Naomi, my first daughter by love, who should have been at my table tonight, who should be alive to watch her boy grow up. I thought about Grace, Vivian's baby Grace, who never got to be 8 years old, who never got to eat sweet potato pie with her hands in a motel room and laugh about bubbles in the bath. I whispered to the stars, I see you, Grace, I see you, baby. We're going to get justice for you. You rest easy now, sweetheart. And I thought about myself. Phoebe Washington, 69 years old now, a woman who had almost disappeared inside her own family, a woman who had almost let them erase her, one Thanksgiving and one Christmas and one birthday at a time. And I thought, Mama, I am still here. I am still here, Mama. If you are listening to this, and you are a woman of a certain age, and you have been sitting quietly at tables where people pretend you are not there, if your children have stopped asking your opinion, and your daughters-in-law have stopped inviting you to things, and your grandchildren are being kept from you for reasons that keep shifting, if you have made yourself smaller and smaller over the years to keep the peace, and you have forgotten what your own voice sounds like when it is angry, and you have started to wonder if maybe you are just the problem, I want you to hear me. You are not the problem. Your silence is not politeness. Your silence is how you have been turning yourself into a ghost in your own life, one Thanksgiving at a time. Look under your table. See what is there that you have not been letting yourself see. And when you are ready, and you will be ready, sooner than you think, stand up. Stand up even if your knees hurt. Stand up even if your hands shake. Stand up even if you are 68 years old and you have not stood up for yourself in 40 years. Stand up. I walked away from my son's Thanksgiving dinner last year. It was the first time in 40 years that I actually sat down.